Заступниця голови Представництва Управління комісара ООН у справах біженців Ноель Калхун.
Дуже дякую, пані Марина. I will also continue in English. The United Nations Refugee Agency in Ukraine has been here for many years, but starting in 2014, as Pani Marina said, we started to work in the east of Ukraine. In the east of Ukraine, we help people to repair the damage that this conflict has done to their homes. We fix roofs, we hang doors, we hang windows, we fix walls for the people who are living on both sides of the contact line. And we're also involved in providing legal assistance to people who are affected by the conflict. I've worked for the UN for a long time, and 18 years ago, when this Security Council resolution was adopted on women, peace, and security, I would never have guessed that it would have any relevance at all for Ukraine. In the past few years, working in Ukraine, I have done a lot of reading about peace building, because it seems to me that if you want to remain a hopeful person in these times, you have to read about peace. And there's one book that I wanted to share with you today because it's the one that has resonated with me the most. And it's a book called The Moral Imagination by John Paul Lederach. That emphasis he made on the word imagination, it intrigued me. He says that the key step for resolving a conflict is to be able to imagine ourselves in a web of relationships that includes our enemies. This requires a creative act. It requires us to speak with a new language, one that takes us beyond the dualistic language of us and them that creeps into the way we talk. If we keep talking about a conflict in those terms, it will never end. Lederach also talks about two ways that peacemakers, like I hope we wish to be, must prepare themselves to transcend the violence in their communities. Firstly, we should dig deeply into our roots. We must know intimately the places that experience the conflict. Importantly, we have to listen to the people who are affected by the conflict, really listen, and build deep relationships. Secondly, we have to be creative. Peacemaking is an art. It involves seeing things differently. It's about giving birth to a new way of perceiving people and circumstances. I think that's why the organizers of this conference have put a Narodная artistka on the panel. So roots, relationships, art, giving birth, these words all hint at the role of women in peace building. The book has some interesting examples about this. One came from Kenya, which resonated with me because I used to work there. In northern Kenya, there was a long clan-based war, and a few women in the community were sick and tired of it. They decided to claim a space where clan does not matter anymore. They decided this would be the market. In the market, it would be safe for all women to come and trade regardless of their clan, and they reinforced this zone of peace. Then they slowly expanded their zone of peace, making alliances with respected men, with business, with youth, and even government. Their relationships, woman to woman, built new connections among clans and eventually transformed the way that the clans viewed one another and treated one another. Relationships can transform. In Northern Ireland, Catholic and Protestant women came together as early as the 1970s in a women's peace movement. In that peace movement, they didn't focus on the long history of conflict. Instead, they focused on the future, about how to save their sons. That's one thing that all the women could agree on. When two women from Northern Ireland won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1976 for this grassroots movement, one of them, Betty Williams, said, "We have not yet brought peace to Northern Ireland. we have created a climate for peace to become respectable. That's a start. Maybe the kind of start that would be relevant for Ukraine. This is a country where in survey after survey, people tell the pollsters that they want peace. Is there a climate in Ukraine where peace is respectable? And can the women here today make it more so? Coming back to this resolution, 1325, it has a beautiful trinity of words: women, peace, security. What does this mean for Ukraine? And how do we implement it? When I read Lederach, I understood that in the first place, we should look to Ukrainian women to answer the question. Ukrainian women are rooted in local relationships. They are creative. They can help us to build a new web of relationships that includes everyone, even those who are considered enemies. Such women can build the web of ties among people and communities. They can work, and Lederach uses the image of patient spiders, smart, flexible, and sensitive to the contours of space and connections. When I think of who those women might be, those who nurture this peacemaking web of ties, I think of internally displaced persons. These are women who have relationships across the broad geography of this beautiful country. They are women from Crimea who moved to Kyiv or to Lviv, but whose parents remain on the peninsula. There are women from Donetsk and Luhansk who have moved to new communities, and they're working very hard for this country. They've learned to love their new homes and their neighbors, but they retain an attachment of the heart to their previous home and neighbors. I also think of women who live close to the contact line. Some of them live so close they can almost smell what their neighbors on the other side are cooking for supper. These are the women who can help to build relationships among people who don't agree with one another. They can help us to see the conflict in a transformative way. The metaphor of spiders is a good one because spiders are very patient. Look at how long it takes them to catch just one fly for their supper. And patience is important with peacemaking because it does take time. I want to close with a few lines from someone who had a bounteous moral imagination about the ending of a different war. This is a poem, a little bit of a poem called The Ending and the Beginning by Wisława Szymborska.
Пані Ноель,
Just 1 minute.
я вас прошу завершувати. Саме такі жінки сидять у цьому залі. Вони б хотіли обговорити, задати питання. Тому прошу вас, даруйте, але прошу
Okay, it's
завершити.
very short. After every war, somebody has to clean up. Things won't straighten themselves after all. From out of the bushes, sometimes someone still unearths rusted out arguments and carries them to the garbage pile. In the grass that is overgrown causes and effects, someone is stretched out, blade of grass in his mouth, and gazing at the clouds.
Дуже дякую вам.